And we are live. Hi, everyone. How's it going? We are live with the Closing Show live. And today I'm super excited because we have an amazing guest who I absolutely personally adore, Morgan J Ingram. But if you got the ping on LinkedIn, you're like, what, like WTF, what the hell is Closing Show Live? Let me remind you, the Closing Show Live is a weekly show. We're featuring the people of Proposify, sales stars in the trenches, and revenue leaders. Every week, we discuss the challenges we're facing and the no BS lessons that we've learned so you can crush your close rates. And today, we have no other than Morgan J Ingram, who's going to take us through how to handle the biggest objections in the sales process so you can win more deals. So it's kind of like objection protection. That's what I'm going to call it.
Objection protection. I haven't heard this before. So
protection from the objection.
That makes it funny. Yeah, I love that.
I love it. So Morgan J Ingram, Morgan, I'm just going to call you Morgan. I'm going to stop saying the full name. Welcome to the show. So happy that you're here.
Yeah, happy I'm here as well. Excited to dive into this.
Amazing. So if you don't know Morgan, that's okay. So there could be a few people here who are like, who is Morgan? So Morgan is the VP of GTM and Talent at Sales Impact Academy. But I know you more as the content creator and sales evangelist that you are. You've been LinkedIn top sales voice many years in a row. Plus, I love you because you train so many SDRs, BDRs, and AEs on how to break through the noise and really just crush their deals. And that's why I love you, because you share so much knowledge and you're a giver, and we love that. So what's really awesome today is that you can also win a 30-minute consultation with Morgan on anything sales related. It has to be sales related.
And, yeah, I don't know. Anything else might be, I don't know, interesting conversation.
So if you want to win, all you have to do is post a comment or question in the LinkedIn chat or the Facebook chat, because we're actually live on Facebook today for the first time. And we might be live next week on Twitter as well. Let me just see if we got some comments coming in. And I'm not seeing any yet, but we'll go ahead and get to them when we get to them. So if you want to win the 30-minute consultation, just throw some questions in the chat and we will enter the win. We'll have a winner by the end of the show, and you'll know by the end of the show. So lots of questions today about objections. So let's get to it. I think that's my new thing.
It's like your thing. I love it.
Hashtag let's get to it. So, okay. So let's talk about objections. What are the top objections salespeople hear? So what, like in your perspective, what is that? What is an objection? How does it happen? What are the most common ones?
Yeah. So I think across the board, when you think of objections, there's like two different sides, right? Like there's the cold calling, email prospecting one, and then there's like on the sales side. But obviously it's the closing show, so we're talking about on the sales side. So the common ones are like, hey, like this isn't a priority right now. Reach out to me in like 6 months. This is too expensive. I don't have the budget for this. I know the objection that's probably gonna happen more frequently now is like, I'm not here anymore, right? Like I don't even work here, right? So these are things that are like starting more and more to happen, and those are like the common objections that people typically are facing. I think everyone else in here could throw some other ones in here as well. Even to a point as well where people might say like, hey, like I've already used this product before and I didn't like it. Okay, that's an objection that will probably start to happen more and more as well. So those are just some common objections that I've heard and seen for my own self.
So it's basically everything I say as a buyer to salespeople.
Yeah.
So it's sorry, it's too expensive right now. It's not the right time. We don't really need it now. It's a really great product, but I just don't need it right now, even though we do have the pain. So it's really like everything that I typically say in the buying process. Yep. And sorry to those whose buying process I've made more difficult because of that. But you mentioned a good point. So the economy, we've all seen change, specifically in tech, we've seen a lot of layoffs. And when you're SaaS, sometimes you're selling to SaaS. I think for some SaaS companies who are not selling to SaaS and they have different verticals and industries to sell into, that's great. But I mean, we have guests who are not in SaaS as well. So, but we have seen this downturn in the economy. So how do you think that's changed and affected the objections that salespeople are getting today?
Yeah. So the objections are going to not say that they're going to massively increase, but they're probably going to be more there. And the reason for that is that the budget gets tighter And then also as well, you're dealing with on the financial side, they're like looking at things more tightly. So everything that you are looking to get accomplished, you need to justify even more, and you need to do better overall discovery. And that's, me and everyone else included. So when you think about these objections, it's more so, how can I get better at my discovery so that when the objections occur, I have the information to address those appropriately. So I would just say be mindful of that. These objections will come up more because of the budget and things that are happening. So you want to prepare accordingly to make sure like, hey, I'm on point when I'm talking to these people.
So good. So that's really an interesting perspective. So again, I'm a marketer, so I'm the VP of marketing at Proposify, and I see the other side. I love how the discovery portion is so important. And I know, and I can tell right away when a salesperson has done their job. First of all, the discovery, they start with a really great relationship. They ask the really great questions. They don't go right into the product and just a random general feature discussion of like, this is what the product does, everything the product does.
Yeah.
But when you've done the discovery, understand the problem, and you understand what's happening with the current buyer and the organization that they're in, but also the economy and how the economy has affected that particular industry. I personally as a buyer, I'm just gravitate towards that. So I love the connection that you made on that. But okay, so back to the objection part though, is like, what's the best way to overcome them? Like, and I know it's a general question. We're gonna go more deeper on that. But like, I know that I'm just like, there's a lot of objections I have, but high level, like what do you do to just generally overcome objections?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm actually curious for the people who are tuning in, like, what are the ways that you go about handling objections? If you want to give your 2 cents as well, would love that input. So everything that I think about is in terms of some type of framework. And when you think about executing something, if you have a framework, it allows you to be more consistent and not overthink it. Because most of the concepts around selling are frameworks that they're very simple frameworks that you can execute on. And then from those frameworks, you then add your style to it. So if we're thinking about how you would typically handle an objection, the very first thing that you need to do before anything happens is that you need to pause. Most people, when they face an objection, they go into a fight phase because you have a fight or flight, right? So what happens is most people go into fight. They're like, well, we're the number one product in the space, and it's like, that's not going to help you at all. Actually, that's going to actually get someone to hang up on you. So you don't want to get into fight mode. You want to get into like an ease mode of like, okay, like let me understand what people are saying. So if someone throws an objection, you pause. And then the next thing that you need to do is ask a question, because when an objection happens, there's 3 reasons why an objection is happening in the first place. Number 1 is they genuinely don't believe that you can help them. 2 is they need a little bit more clarity on what's going on. Like they're doing objection because they just want to understand, right? They really are just like, yeah, I just don't understand what's going on. 3 is they're not a decision maker. So they're just throwing objections out there just to throw objections out there, but they're actually really not a decision maker. So what they're saying isn't as relevant. So you need to figure that out so you can get to that person. So the reason I say question is next after the pause, because you need to identify what of those 3 scenarios are happening. So by me asking a question, I can figure out, okay, this person genuinely doesn't think I can help, or they needed clarity. So I need to figure out why they're actually asking about this objection. Why is it coming up in the first place? Or this person actually has no power at all. So now I just uncovered that this person can't even answer my question. I need to go talk to someone else. This person's just trying to throw me off. And then the third part is the key part, which is like you're telling some type of story, or you're answering that objection. So once you have the question stated, you think you get the answer, and then from there you can figure it out. And you do want to acknowledge the objection as well. So you could say pause, acknowledge, ask a question, and then based off that answer, you're going to tell a story and articulate, the best way to move forward. But you're not going to truly be able to answer that objection without asking a question to then uncover what that even means in the first place.
Gotcha. The clarity part is something that resonates with me. I think it's so important to get the clarity. Like, start with the why. Like, why are we talking? Why am I here for you? Why? And it's really important to do that research before you even contact someone, because the more research you do, I think the less objections you're going to have. Because if, as the buyer on this side, if you know who I am, you've done some research on my company, what we do, the type of industry we're in, all those things bring clarity into the conversation. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
I understand, oh, okay, like you've done your research, you know what's going on. I'm less likely to object because of that. But interested to hear what you in the audience, those joining us live, what you think, why the objections are happening. Clarity for me resonates the most. Also, just a reminder, if you want to win a 30-minute consultation with Morgan, just drop some comments or questions into the chat and you will be entered to win. We're drawing right after the show. You're going to find out today if you win the 30-minute consultation. It's just easy as that. So my next question is around, do you think certain objections actually mean something else? So like, I think like there's some decoding that has to happen with objections, don't you think? Like, so let's just say like you haven't really been clear, the clarity of the conversation, or you haven't been clear about why the conversation's happening, and certain objections are coming. But don't some objections sometimes mean something else, specifically around pricing? Like if someone's saying, oh, just, you know what, like not the right price, or not
Yeah.
really a great time for this particular product. Like what do those things actually mean?
Yeah. So if you're let's just go with the pricing example. So typically that probably means that they don't believe, kind of similar to what I said earlier, they don't believe that the value you're going to bring matches that price, right? Because people will pay for things that they think is valuable, right? Like people go and pay a lot of money to go to like a 5-star restaurant. People pay a lot of money to go on like a really nice trip that was probably worth a lot of money, right? Even cars, like people will pay like a lot of money for a car, right?
Mm.
And in retrospect, it's like, well, it's a car, just gets you from one place to the other, right? But there's certain aspects of certain cars that people are willing to pay a lot of money for. So when you think about it that way, that's like the context that I see it as, is that like, hey, there's different components of like how you really want to be able to go about that and effectively get that done. And I think also as well, like if we take a step back, there actually might be something that you might be charging the same price as something as what someone else is, but they're getting more for that same price. So that's why it's important to understand and ask questions to figure out who else are they talking to, because
Mm.
your offering could be the same as someone else's, but the price, I mean, but their offering is like, we get way more information. That could be a scenario, and there's something to recognize.
I also think that if you get the clarity up front, then there's less likely in, I guess, the scenario with decoding doesn't really happen, because if
Yeah.
so there it's almost like an excuse, right? But if you understand
Yeah.
what the problem is, you understand what stage the company's at, you understand what the problems are, then I find that the objections are less likely to happen.
Yeah.
Jeff says, I think most people enter a sales process having already decided to buy or not buy a product. So I wonder if objections are really just validations of their already held opinion. And if an objection is successfully overcome somehow, that gives them reasons to reconsider. Love that. What do you think about that, Morgan?
I think there's a component of that is correct. I would say that leans more on the inbound perspective, right? If someone's coming in inbound, then they definitely have already made the decision to buy, and they already have things that they're looking for, and their decision criteria is more crisp. However, on the other side, if you're doing an outbound discovery call, they actually might not be in the situation to buy at all. Like you just maybe caught them at the right time that they're looking, but that doesn't mean they're looking to buy per se. They might just be looking and to see like if it's something they even want to do. And then that's when the conversation even changes, where your questions have to be more on point and the objections are a little bit different. But if someone's coming in inbound, yeah, I think Jeff's point is spot on there, is that like they're really just validating, is this the right thing for me? So you have to look at this objection from two different standpoints. On if it's an outbound discovery call, is completely different than an inbound discovery call. So those are just things to take into consideration.
Yeah, I did that one time. So I think I completely surprised the salesperson.
Yeah.
So we were just building an SDR team, and I had to we didn't have like a really well-oiled SDR engine, and we needed to kind of outsource for a little bit. And then one day this person just like contacted me because
Yeah.
we were having this problem. We were in the decision-making process, but we hadn't actually reached out. Well, we weren't really in the decision-making, but we hadn't reached out yet to like start researching. And somebody just like called me one day, or like, I think it was I think it was an email actually. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? We need this. And then he ended up selling me on this in like 10 days. So sometimes you get surprises
Yeah.
like that too, where it's like, but it was pure outbound. I had the need. He contacted me at the exact right time.
Yeah, and
And
that
then
happens
he
sometimes.
closed us.
Yeah.
So those okay, so let's talk about like objections at different times of the deal. So sometimes like objections at the beginning is easy, like, you know
Mhm.
what, okay, fine, whatever, you don't need this right now, let's move on. But sometimes like it happens at the end of the deal. So what up? Why is it objections happening at the end? What went wrong? Why did it happen?
Yeah, so most of the time when an objection happens at the end of the deal is, again, if you think about it as a buyer experience, or again, there are other people involved, right? So these objections are coming from like someone told someone something, and now they're like, okay, now we're actually gonna like look at this a little bit differently. So whether they're pushing things out or whatever that is, they're gonna make like three decisions, right? One is they're gonna pick somebody else, two, they're gonna pick you, or three, they're gonna look at status quo. So a lot of the objections come from what they're already currently doing, because they're like, well, like, what about this? What about that? Right? Because changing something is very difficult to do. So most people end up sticking with the status quo and they make an indecision, right? More than choosing someone else. You have
Yeah.
to take that in consideration. So those objections are starting to come up because it's like, oh, we're getting closer to the point where we have to make a decision. Now I'm starting to feel a little bit nervous about this decision because it's on me to make this decision. And like, it's like, it's my career, it's my choice, right? So
Yeah.
when ends up happening is people get more nervous, which is why you get those objections, because they want to make sure that this is the right move for them, because it's going to be on them if they implement or buy something. It's like, okay, then you better make sure this is the right thing, because like if it's not, it's on that person.
So much
That's why,
pressure.
yeah, exactly, that's why you get more of those objections, because it's like basically to get clarity.
Cool. So, but that it is, yeah. So I think that you also hit on the head in terms of hit the nail on the head. You didn't hit the head, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Around, around, so you want to be able to go through objections as early as possible, so you do not at the end have to deal with the stuff. Like if you've gone through a whole buying process and objections are happening at the end, then usually it's somebody that's probably nervous making the decision for some reason or another. So they've been positive, everything's been going great, and then all of a sudden there's the pressure of making the decision. So as a salesperson, I think it's important to ease the mind of the decision buyer or the decision
Yeah,
maker.
and you
Yeah.
wanna really focus in on looking to unqualify people on the first call. If you're looking to like qualify people and not move them forward, then more objections will occur across them as well, because you're gonna be like, hey, like this might not be for you, it might not be this thing, and like they'll be like, no, no, no. Well, and then they'll be able to explain their situation, and you'll actually be able to address some things that would be objections down the line. I always tell people, like, just be mindful if you're not getting any objections at all and you're getting towards the end and then you get them, that there's this like not good, because then like someone probably already answered those objections that you're getting thrown at right now. So now you're in a recoverable mode, like, oh, what's going on? Like you want to
Yeah.
address that preemptive strike before it even happens.
Love it. Preemptive strike. So there's a really interesting comment in the chat on LinkedIn, and it's around building trust. So because as buyers, we have been burned a
Yeah, yeah,
bunch of
yeah,
times. Like
yeah.
and sometimes we don't know that until onboarding happens, and then
Y-
onboarding's
yeah.
I won't say it out loud.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So I think that's another layer to this is like building trust as early as possible. So when you get to the end, that trust has already been built. And it's hard to do that in the initial call. So I'm just curious, like, what's the best way? And this user's asked, what is the best way to build that trust on an initial call so you can get to the next call?
Yeah. So I don't know. Let's throw it out there for maybe some people who are buyers or people who are sellers. How many? And actually, Nadia, I'm actually curious for you. Do you all get annoyed, or you're like, this is like not the call I want to be on, when a seller's like starts the conversation being like, hey, how's the weather in X city? Is that like, does that?
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
I am like I'm the outlier on
Yeah,
this.
the outlier. Okay, I'm actually curious. I'm curious. Yeah.
I saw a poll on this the other day and it was like, I think it was very much skewed to people hating talking about the weather, but like, I don't know if it's because I'm Canadian. I actually like talking about the weather. Or I'm like, I don't know. I'm like a mom. So maybe it's like just like a cheesy mom thing that we like to do.
Yeah.
Like, what's the weather? Oh,
Yeah.
take snow pants, kids. Like, I'm not sure what it is, but I love talking about the weather. But I know most people don't. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm curious on other people's opinions and how you feel about it. You can chime in the chat because it's just an overall thing. But my point is that most people, when they get on a call, they don't build real rapport. They ask about things that they inherently don't care about and doesn't lead to them actually closing the deal. So typically, like if I start a conversation, it's not like asking about things that aren't irrelevant. It actually goes into like what I've learned. So what I'll do is, and you can find company goals. It depends on the company. If it's public, you can look at a 10K report. There's a section called management's analysis and discussion. If you go find that in any 10K report, it's like 10 pages of telling you exactly what they're looking to accomplish in the next year. So I would definitely use that tip I just shared. Anyways, my point is on the first 3 to 5 minutes of the call, I'm like, hey, I did some research on your organization and I wanted to share what I found. Can I do that? Great. Awesome. So then I just go into it, say, hey, I looked on your website, noticed that you're hiring. I mean, for me, I'm selling sales coaching, right? So it's like, hey, like, I noticed that it looks like you're hiring for like SDRs, account executives, and managers. So it looks like you're looking to grow that team. Looks like you're hiring an enablement role. So looks like training coaching might be something on the radar right now. And then also as well, like I looked at your product updates. Looks like you're having a couple products. You probably will need some sales messaging around that. And I also noticed that you just hired a CRO. So that means you probably have an increased revenue target and you're probably trying to identify how to figure that out. Is that accurate or am I missing something? Now,
so good.
the thing is that when that happens, the person's going to talk for like 10 to 15 minutes, which is what you want. And now they're like, wow, a sales rep actually showed up and did something that was different than everyone else, which again, you're focusing on the buyer experience because now they know they can trust you because you did some research before. I just told you about your company before we even got in a conversation. So I don't know who's listening in, if you're a sales leader or you have a sales team or you're a sales rep. If you do that, you will effectively close more deals because you're going to get more insight than everyone else.
Those are some really cool intense signals that you just threw out there. Like it's understanding what's happening with the company that could signal, yeah, you know what, they're actually probably at a good stage to purchase this whatever enablement tool or whatever it is that you're selling. So I love that. Drink has noticed that most companies believe they have a unique situation and a specific workflow. It comes down to appreciating the way of doing the job, and then in one way or another, convincing them that making the change will pay off. Yeah, I love that. And I think that helps with building trust when you're the buyer. So I'm a marketer. Okay. So I find that like, if somebody came to me and was like, you know what, it's just too expensive. Or if it was like, they come to me and they're like, if I was a seller, this is just not the right time. I'd be like, okay, yeah, no problem. No problem. It's all good. So that's probably why I'm a marketer, not a seller. I pick up on that stuff pretty easy.
Yeah.
As a seller, how do you keep the conversation going with objections without being annoying to the buyer? Like, how do you do that?
The objections is just, said it earlier. It's either seeking some type of clarity, or sometimes, well, this is when you sell to sales leaders, but like in general, sometimes it might just be to throw you off. Right? To be like, oh, let's just see how this person handles this, especially when people ask for discounts. Well, no, when people ask for discounts at the end of the sales cycle, like, yeah, you might just give them a discount, but like if you would have like addressed it and said like, hey, no, this is the reason why this investment is the way it is, like you probably would actually get the full price instead of discounting for no reason, because most people actually don't even acknowledge or recognize you gave them a discount, because when you come back, they're like, oh, I want the same price, and they don't realize that you did them a favor. So that's just why the reason I don't typically, I mean, there's always scenarios, but the large majority of the time, like 99% of the time, I don't like to do a discount or anything of that nature, because like you're in a situation now where you're in that price and you have to move forward with it. Ultimately though, when you are facing objections, the goal is, like we talked about earlier, is to ask continuous questions. The goal is just to continuously have the conversation going by asking questions, to seeking to understand. If you come at an objection and you're hostile and you're like, I don't know if that's right or not, like that's not going to help you. You truly want to be able to come from a consultative, trusted advisor standpoint and ask questions to understand what's truly happening. That's the reason why I always tell people to pause and assess and really ask the right questions, because otherwise you're putting yourself in a bad spot.
Love it. Leah asks, what resources would you use to try to find company specific goals so that outreach is focused specifically for marketing titles? So what are some of the intent signals you can maybe look at, understand? What company specific goals do you look at to connect?
Yeah. So one thing that you can go to is, it's not always there, but it should be. So most of the time, people will have the careers page. And if you go to the careers page, people just see they're hiring people, and then they move on. You need to double click inside of the marketing leadership role and then identify what are they actually doing. It actually tells you like, hey, we're hiring a VP of demand gen. Here are the things they're going to be responsible for. And also as well, what you can do is job posts in the past, they'll still have them up in certain places. So you can actually go type in like VP of marketing at X company and try to find like the job description or the career role that was open. And you're going to go in there and look at that description and then to figure out how to like get that done and detail it accordingly. So that's like another thing that you want to take in consideration as well, is looking at the careers page. I already mentioned the 10K report if it's a public company, but if it's not a public company, go to the careers page, go look up the marketing roles. It'll tell you what's going on. So I'll give you an example. If you look at a company page right now and they're hiring a demand generation person, an event person, and a head of influencer marketing, that means that they're going to go really, really hard on virtual events moving forward. And they're going to start doing in-person events and start like getting people to ask as influencers. Like I can already tell you exactly what's happening. So I can look at, or anyone could look at a careers page and you could tell exactly where the company's going. For example, if they're not hiring anyone, it's like, that should tell you something, right? Typically, that means that they have halted hiring and they're assessing their product and they're trying to figure things out. And they're probably not in a good situation right now to invest into whatever you're asking them to invest into. So the careers page typically tells the story.
So good. We're just under 4 minutes to the end of this live. It's not too late to win a 30-minute consultation with Morgan. All you got to do is drop some more questions in the chat. And to win, we're going to be drawing right after the show. So you'll know today if you get the 30-minute consultation. So don't be shy. Just ask a question. So last question before we go into a rapid fire, which is going to be really fun. So when do you just accept, I just don't need this? Like, so I'm a buyer. I just don't need this. I don't need it. I don't need it right now. When do you just move on?
Wait, as a buyer or as the seller?
As the seller. As the seller. Okay. When do you move on? So there's been a few objections. Like they seem like they're the company that would need this product, whatever the product is that you're selling.
Yeah.
But they're saying no. It's been kind of positive. Some of the engagements, you've gone past maybe the first call, but when do you actually know when to move on?
Yeah. So I would say that this is hard for sales. This is hard, right? Because we get emotional towards our deals. We're like, I know this is gonna close. I got this one, and like, yeah, it's probably not.
They love me. They really love me.
Yeah, and it's like absolutely not. So here's the thing: if you have not, this is the clear cut. If you cannot articulate what the problem is and how you are going to solve that problem, and you're having fireside chats, you need to get rid of that deal. If you are not being introduced to power, that means that they don't probably trust you enough to get in front of that person, because they might not think that you actually can help, but they're talking to you to typically sometimes even get free consulting. So you got to be careful on that. Like you got to be careful on those calls too. So I always, the way that I've done it is I have like, so on deal sizes, depending on like what I'm selling, let's say it's like 50 days. So if the deal has gone over 50 days and that's like my average close time, at that point, that's when I'm assessing to get it out of the pipeline. Because at that point, like it's gone above my average. This is taking way too long. They're just not ready for it. I need to move on, because everything's about energy, right? If I'm spending my time following up on someone who like effectively doesn't want to move forward, I could have done like 10, 20, 30 outreaches that day to someone else that actually is a better fit. So I aim to not be as emotional about my deals, or I recommend that to anyone as well. And focusing on like where I can go get real advantages and real things done. So that's like the way I think about it.
Yeah, I always say don't manage your time, manage your energy. Yeah. Manage your energy, don't manage your time. How are you going to spend your energy this day, this week, this month?
Yeah.
Love it. And so you mentioned like, so look at your sales close, your typical closing window, or and understand like if it's a 50-day cycle that you're usually in, you don't want to go over that time frame. So you look at your business, what's your average closing cycle, and then is that when you should stop, just end the deal? Like that's when you should.
That's what you don't end the deal. You just need to reach out and figure out what the heck's going on. Like you need to hop on a call and say like, hey, like typically like, we've talked about these things. Like, is this something that you're looking to do? Like, what are some things that we're missing? Like, you just need to put a little bit more pressure on them to give them an answer to figure out what are we actually doing? Because then you just be sitting there and you're gonna be miserable. You're gonna be like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna do rapid fire. So I'm gonna give you scenarios and you tell me what's going on, and like, so it's kind of decoding it, but like you're gonna let me know what's happening with this particular scenario. So putting Morgan on the hot seat here.
Let's go.
Okay, so I'm the buyer. I'm saying this just isn't the right time. What's happening?
Yeah. So effectively, like what's happening here is there's a lot of different parties and there's a lot of things in place. It also could mean there's a change in leadership. So you need to like identify like what's going on. So you've done discovery, you've done the work. This is where you need to figure out like, okay, like this is what I would ask people. It's like, okay, cool. Like we have we have had some really good conversations so far. Let's just say you've done discovery because that's just too much of a scenario. Let's say you've done discovery. We've uncovered that these are your problems you're looking to address. And you said that this is something that needs to happen. So I'm curious, what are you going to be doing between now and then to solve those problems?
Love it.
Because like, okay, like you don't want to do this. It's not the time. But what are you going to do about these problems we just uncovered? And you just don't say anything.
It's like the long pause.
Yeah, you just don't say anything because like they're gonna have to give you an answer. Like, how are you gonna solve that? Right. So that's how you handle that.
Love it. Way too expensive.
Yeah. So expensive is a relative term. I always use this every single time. So most of you probably know who Jay-Z is. I would hope. And so
Jay-Z.
Yeah, it's like
I'm so hip.
Yeah, exactly.
I know Jay-Z.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty sure y'all know who that is. So he has a lot of money. He's a billionaire, right? So if he goes to the Porsche lot, he's not going to think that those Porsches are expensive. He could probably buy a whole entire lot if he wanted to. However, some of us might go in there and be like, "Well, this is a lot of money. That's expensive." So it's relative. So when someone says this is too expensive, I say, "Okay, compared to what? What are we comparing this to?" Like, what's going on? So like that's a very like straightforward, simple way to respond to that. Like, hey, compared to what?
Thank you. Next and last one. We had 6, but no S3. We already use X solution. So this solution, and this sounds so much like that.
Yeah.
So we're just not gonna move forward with it.
Yeah. So what's happening here is like throughout the discovery, you haven't truly gotten to the point maybe in that demo where you showed where something was a unique differentiator. You haven't shown that yet, and they think it's the same exact thing. And they're like, why would I go? Because you got to think about it. Why would I go invest into a new solution and tell everyone we got to change all our backend operations and our whole backend data or whatever you're implementing, APIs, all that crazy stuff? Why would I do that if this is the same exact thing? Like, there's no purpose in that, right? You got to think about not just the price, but the labor amount of work that goes into like actually changing a product, which most sellers don't think about. It's like, we got to get ops involved. We got to get like these teams involved. You got to get a lot of people involved to change a whole entire system, right? So it better be different and it better work. So that's why they're asking that. So what you now need to do is rediscover. So instead of being like, oh, we're number one in the market, we work with all these big companies that they probably don't care about, you're just going to say, hey, like when you originally invested into that solution, what was your decision criteria? Right? Let's just bring it back. Hey, we were looking to cover X, Y, Z, whatever, blue, whoa. Yeah, cool. Then you're gonna be like, okay, so has anything changed since that original decision criteria that you laid out? Now they're gonna be like, you know what? We want to do this, 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 and this. Now, depending on what your product or service is, you now need to then figure out the answers to whatever they said. I can't tell you that because I don't know. Everyone's gonna be different, but it gets you to where you need to be. Because at that point, they're gonna be like, well, this is what's changed. And you need to figure out, does your product actually help with that change? Or you might be in a scenario where it doesn't. And that's when, again, we go back to the question earlier, you might need to get out of there because now you're not going to be able to really help them.
Love it. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I want to go over and do another 10 minutes, but we got to end it. Thanks so much for joining us today. So it's your last chance to win a 30-minute consultation. If you've had questions, we'll get back to you in the LinkedIn comments after the show. If you've missed it and you want to play it back, just look at the event on LinkedIn or Facebook, or go into proposify.com/webinars. You can catch all of our closing live shows. Thanks so much for being here, Morgan. I've loved everything about today. And I've learned a lot. I'm a marketer trying to figure out how to be, how do you get, what makes a salesperson, how do you take them from good to great? And I feel like every week I'm learning how to do that. So thanks everyone. Join us next week. We're live every single Wednesday.